Well, hello, and welcome back to Fluent and Fearless, the podcast that helps you communicate clearly, confidently, and naturally in American English, whether you're a native speaker or you're learning English as a second language. I'm Katherine Arthur, an American English pronunciation and accent instructor, a speech-language pathologist, and a radio broadcaster. So talking is my specialty. And today we're talking about a challenge that almost every professional who speaks English as a second language encounters at some point. And that is understanding native speakers in real conversations. So let me start today with a question. Have you ever been in a meeting where everyone was speaking English and you knew the vocabulary, you understood the topic, and yet somehow you still felt lost? Maybe a colleague asked a question, and everyone nodded, and you were just sitting there thinking, wait a minute, what exactly did they say? Or perhaps you've experienced this on a phone call. The person on the other end speaks only for a few seconds, and suddenly you're asking them to repeat themselves. And that's not because your English is poor, but because what you heard didn't sound like the English that you've studied. If that sounds familiar to you, you're definitely not alone. In fact, many ESL professionals tell me the same thing, that they can read reports, they can write professional emails, and they can deliver presentations. But understanding fast, casual American English speech can still feel surprisingly difficult for them. And one of the biggest reasons is something that we call connected speech. Well, today we're going to talk about what connected speech is, why it creates so much frustration for ESL professionals, and most importantly, what you can do about it. So let's get started. I'm Katherine Arthur, and this is Fluent and Fearless. Now, one of the interesting things about learning English is that there's often a gap between classroom English and real-world English. In the classroom, language is usually presented clearly and carefully. Words are pronounced individually. Sentences are spoken slowly, and grammar is highlighted. Everything feels organized, right? Then you step into a workplace meeting, a networking event, or a casual conversation with native speakers, and suddenly it feels like everyone is speaking a different version of English from what you learned. The words seem to blend together, sounds disappear, and entire phrases seem to transform into something else. Many learners assume that the problem is that the speaker is talking too fast, but speed is really only part of the story. The bigger issue is that native speakers don't speak word by word. They speak in connected chunks of words. They connect sounds, shorten words, and simplify pronunciation without even really thinking about it, and that's connected speech. And once you understand that, spoken English starts to make a lot more sense. Let me give you an example. As we've learned, in textbooks, words are presented clearly and separately. For example, what are you doing? That looks simple, but when spoken naturally, it might sound like, what are you doing? Or consider something like, did you eat yet? Many Americans will say something closer to, "Jeet yet?" For ESL professionals, that can be incredibly frustrating. You know the words and you know the grammar, but your brain just does not recognize those sounds. That's because connected speech often isn't taught to those who speak English as a second language, but you can learn it, and I will show you how. Now, connected speech becomes especially challenging in professional environments because the stakes are so much higher. Imagine you're in a meeting. Your manager asks you a question, and you only catch about 70% of what was said. Now you have two tasks beginning at the same time. First, you're trying to understand the question. Second, you're trying to formulate an answer, and that's a lot of cognitive effort. Many professionals tell me that they feel exhausted after meetings conducted entirely in English. That's a lot of cognitive effort for them. The reason isn't necessarily the content. The reason is that their brain is working overtime to decode that connected speech. Every conversation becomes a listening exercise, and that can be mentally draining. Let's imagine you're listening to someone say, "What do you want to do?" That's a simple sentence, right? But when many Americans say that naturally, it might sound more like, "What do you want to do?" Now imagine you're an ESL professional sitting in a meeting. Your brain is trying to match what you hear with the English that you've learned. You know the words what, do, want, and to, but you don't hear those words. You hear, "What do you wanna?" So your brain starts searching for meaning. For a split second, communication slows down. And by the time you've figured out the sentence, the speaker has already moved on. Does that sound familiar? This happens because listening isn't just about vocabulary. It's about recognizing patterns. Native speakers have spent their entire lives hearing these patterns. Many ESL learners have not. That's why connected speech can feel so exhausting. Your brain is doing extra work that native speakers don't even realize exists. Now, here's something important to understand. Native speakers don't usually think in individual words. They think in phrases. As a result, words naturally blend together. For example, want to becomes wanna. Going to becomes gonna. Let me becomes lemme. What do you becomes would ya. And native speakers are rarely aware that they're even doing this. They're not trying to speak less clearly. Their mouths are simply taking the most efficient path. And American English can be a very efficient language. Now, the challenge is that many ESL learners are listening for dictionary pronunciation, while native speakers are producing conversational pronunciation. And those two don't match up. Now, here's the encouraging part. Connected speech is not random. It's not chaotic. It's not something you have to memorize sentence by sentence. It follows predictable patterns. And once you learn those patterns, your listening skills will improve dramatically. Now think about driving. When you first learned to drive, everything required conscious effort. You had to pay attention to the mirrors, the traffic signals, how fast you were going, and you had to pay attention to the traffic. But eventually, your brain begins to recognize those patterns automatically. Connected speech works much the same way. The more patterns you recognize, the easier listening becomes. So let's take a look at a few of the most common patterns. Here are 4 connected speech patterns that cause confusion. Pattern number 1 is linking. This happens when speakers connect words together and they connect them smoothly. For example, pick it up becomes pick it up. Turn it on becomes turn it on. Take it easy becomes take it easy. And call him becomes call him. As you've noticed, native speakers rarely stop between each word. Instead, the words kind of flow together. And notice something important here. The words themselves haven't changed, so the speaker isn't mumbling when they talk. They're simply moving from one sound to the next without unnecessary pauses. Why does this happen? Well, it's because English is designed to flow. Vowels flow into vowels, vowels flow into consonants, and consonants flow into vowels. Sometimes consonants connect to other consonants or they disappear altogether. So begin listening for phrases instead of individual words, and this becomes much easier to understand. And we will definitely take a closer look at this in a future episode of Fluent and Fearless. So now let's look at another connected speech pattern that can cause confusion, and that's pattern number 2, known as reduction. This is probably the pattern that surprises learners the most. In English, not every word receives equal attention. Certain words carry meaning, other words become shorter and weaker. For example, I want to go. Most Americans will not emphasize the word to. Instead, they reduce it. I want to go. The same thing happens with phrases like going to. We've already mentioned that changes to gonna. Want to becomes wanna. Have to becomes have to. Let me becomes lemme. And give me becomes gimme. At first, these forms can sound confusing, but they're incredibly common in casual American English. And if you want more information on this, check out our last 2 episodes of Fluent and Fearless, including the most overlooked key to sounding natural in American English and sentence stress, why Americans don't pronounce every word equally. The third connected speech pattern that often causes confusion for those who speak English as a second language is the famous American T. Now let's talk about one of the most recognizable features of American English. It's the flap T, also known as the tap T. So words like water, better, city, meeting, and little. Those contain T's, but the T sound doesn't sound like a traditional T at all. Instead, Americans quickly tap the tongue against the roof of their mouth. The result sounds almost like a soft D. That's why we pronounce water as water and city as city. Again, this is not incorrect pronunciation. It's standard American English. And once you know to listen for it, these words suddenly become much easier to recognize. And our final pattern of connected speech that confuses ESL listeners, well, that occurs when neighboring sounds influence each other. For example, did you often becomes did ya. Would you can become would ya. Could you becomes could ya. And native speakers aren't consciously making these changes. They're simply choosing the easiest path for the mouth to move. American English speech is very efficient, like I mentioned, and the mouth naturally looks for shortcuts. Understanding these shortcuts makes listening much less frustrating for you. And now you might be wondering, okay, this is interesting, but why does it matter? Well, it matters because communication doesn't happen in a classroom. It happens in real life. It's happening during meetings, phone calls, interviews, presentations, networking events, patient interactions, client conversations, and the ability to quickly understand spoken English will affect your confidence, and confidence affects participation. Because when you're constantly decoding speech, trying to understand speech, it's difficult to focus on contributing your ideas. But when listening becomes easier, something remarkable happens. Speaking and understanding American English becomes more natural, and you gain more confidence. That's because understanding connected speech often becomes more than a pronunciation issue. It becomes a confidence issue. Many professionals will begin to assume that their listening skills just aren't good enough, or maybe that they think their English may not be advanced enough, or they might worry that they're not a strong communicator. But often those conclusions are not accurate. The real issue is that nobody taught them how spoken English actually works. Now, when you understand connected speech, something interesting begins to happen. Conversations, they don't seem quite so fast to you. They start to slow down. And that's not because speakers are speaking more slowly. It's because your brain is recognizing the patterns. You stop processing individual words and you begin to process chunks of language. And that's exactly what native speakers do. So if you want to improve your understanding of connected speech, get started today. Here are some practical things that you can do, and you can do them right away. First of all, listen to short audio clips or YouTube videos, and listen for phrases, not individual words. So train yourself to hear connected phrases like kinda, sorta, gonna, wanna, lemme. The brain processes language more efficiently when it recognizes groups of words. Second, slow down your listening practice. So take a 1-minute clip of a YouTube video or a clip of a podcast like Fluent and Fearless and listen carefully. Pause it frequently and notice where sounds connect and where sounds change. Now, the goal isn't speed. The goal is awareness of those connections in the speech. Now, the third thing that you can do to improve your understanding of connected speech is to practice speaking some of these patterns out loud. Not because you want to sound exactly like a native speaker, but because speaking and listening reinforce each other. Making these patterns helps you recognize them when others use them. And the more that your mouth and brain learn these patterns, the more your ears will recognize them. Finally, use transcripts whenever possible. Compare what you hear with what was actually said. The differences can be eye-opening. Try it with any episode of Fluent and Fearless, and you'll see what I mean. Now, if you've ever struggled to understand native speakers, I want you to remember this. The problem may not be your English. The problem may be that nobody ever explained connected speech. Native speakers are not speaking a different language from what you learned in the classroom. They're simply using the natural shortcuts that occur in everyday conversation. And once you learn these shortcuts, conversations will become easier. Meetings will become less exhausting. Phone calls will become less stressful. And that is why understanding connected speech matters so much at work. You just become more present, and you will respond more quickly, and you'll stop worrying about what was just said, and you'll start thinking about what you want to say next. And that is where communication confidence will begin. Your confidence grows because you're spending less energy understanding speech and more energy sharing your ideas. That's when confidence grows. Not because English suddenly becomes easier, but because you finally understand what's happening. And really, that's what communication confidence is all about. And with that, I'm Katherine Arthur, and thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Fluent and Fearless. If you found today's discussion helpful, and I certainly think you did, consider sharing this episode with a colleague, a friend, or a fellow professional who speaks English as a second language. And if connected speech has ever made you feel frustrated, remember this. The problem is not that you're bad at English. The problem is that nobody explained the rules of natural spoken English. But now you know what they are. And now that you know what to listen for, you'll start hearing those patterns everywhere. And if you're ready to take your communication skills to the next level, I'd love to help. If you speak English as a second language and you're concerned about your pronunciation of American English, you know that I am here to help you. I want you to be fluent and fearless, and I know that you can do it. Remember, working on your speech and pronunciation does not mean that your accent is a problem, not at all. Working on your speech and pronunciation means that you value communication. It means that you're investing in yourself. And what really counts is connecting with other people, building relationships, and showing the world who you are as a unique individual. So whether you're looking to succeed in your career, or just want to feel more confident in everyday conversations, or perhaps both, accent modification can give you the advantage that you're looking for. If you're ready to explore accent modification, I have a free offer for you. Just visit my website at pronouncespeech.com. Again, pronouncespeech.com. Find out how to book a free assessment with me, Katherine Arthur, at no cost and no obligation. My free assessments are a low-key and conversational way to learn how you can benefit from accent modification. Again, that website, pronouncespeech.com, pronouncespeech.com. So again, this is Katherine Arthur, and thanks for joining me on this edition of Fluent and Fearless. Be sure to look me up on LinkedIn, and you can find Pronouns Speech and Accent Specialists on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Go there today. So until next time, keep speaking, keep showing up, And keep reminding yourself that your voice deserves to be heard. This is Katherine Arthur. Thanks again for listening. And I'll talk to you next time on Fluent and Fearless.